One of the biggest problems in today's property market is the lack of housing stock out there. And one of the many issues that our clients are coming across is going out there, finding the house of their dreams, going through the application process, and then finding 5, 6, 7 weeks down the line when they have their survey that the property needs more work than they initially thought it did. So today we wanted to give you some tips on what to look out for when you're doing a viewing and how to approach it. So when I view a house personally for myself, I follow a particular pattern and everything I look for. Now don't judge me because I'm not an artist, but if this is your standard house, and if we're looking at say a terrace house in this example, okay, the first thing I would do is cross the street. And in particular, I'm looking at the roof, and I'm looking at the apex of the roof here. And what I'm looking to make sure is there's no sagging at any point here, and no undulations, okay? That in itself could be a sign that the joists are failing, particularly as well if you see sagging in the roof there. It could be that the roof tiles that have been put on the roof were too heavy for the joists that were originally put there when they built the house. Another thing to look out for is to look at the other houses on the street. More often than not, you'll know, unless you're buying a detached property where there's a number of different styles of properties on the road, is that there'll be a number of houses that are a very similar style. As you look up and down the street, look and see the age of the roof. So you'll always see one house that has a brand new roof and one house that has a really old roof, and that will give you the opportunity to gauge roughly how old your roof is. And typically speaking, a slate roof will last in the region of 25 to 30 years before it will need replacing. You also want to look at the guttering along the line here. So if you walk up to the front of the house and look up through the guttering, if you can see daylight between the guttering and the wall, all that's happening is water's running down the roof, missing the guttering and coming down the sides of your house. That can then lead to problems with damp. So obviously you need to make sure the guttering's in good order. If appropriate, if it's the type of house that needs a damp-proof course, you will sometimes see it in the bricks here. About 3 bricks up, you'll see like a black line slightly sticking out. That's a damp-proof membrane. That should be, generally speaking, around about 3 bricks higher than the ground. If you have paving or a driveway that butts up straight to the front of the house, without any gap between the wall and that paving, what can happen is the rainwater can bounce off the driveway and bounce up over the top of that damp-proof membrane. That then can lead to damp, and you can often think that that's possibly rising damp, which can be expensive to fix, whereas this is a lot easier to deal with. Most properties will have either what's called a French trench, which is a gap about probably 8 inches wide with loads of pebbles in it around the outside of the house, or potentially you might have a drain that runs along the exterior, and that prevents any kind of bounce back. If it's a terrace property that's had a damp-proof injection, again you'll see lots of series of holes outside the house that have been drilled into the wall. Again, these should be 3 bricks higher than the ground floor as a minimum. If they're any lower than this, again you're going to have this issue where water is bouncing, and potentially that needs redoing. Okay. You want to look at the exterior of the windows. If they're timber frame windows, look to see what kind of condition they're in. You know, have they been repainted recently? Are there any signs of deterioration or rot? If they're UPVC windows, ask when they were installed. Typically speaking, a UPVC window will last around about 15 years, but the glass will only last probably 5 to 10, depending on whether it's north or south facing. Replacing the glass in a window is relatively cheap to do. Replacing the frames is where the expense is. So again, having a good idea of when they're initially installed is always good. Again, look at the front door. If it's a PVC door, then similar process applies. If it's a wooden door, again, just double check and see if it's in good order, that there's no that it's not sticking, it's not swelling or anything like that. When you get inside the property, you're looking for signs of damp. Any damp, which is, so if this is our floor here, any damp below this kind of level, so kind of waist height, is typically rising damp. If it's not being caused by the issues here, you'll see signs of mould, paint flaking, and kind of pebbling of the plaster. If it is rising damp, that will mean it's a new damp-proof course. That involves chipping off all the plaster up to that high, injecting new damp-proof course, and then replastering and redecorating throughout. Typically speaking, on a terrace house, you're looking in the region around about £5,000 for that, so it can be quite expensive. If you're looking at the plaster itself, if it's an old house, say you're 1930s, anywhere up to 1950s, and there's wallpaper on the wall that looks like it's been there in a while, you realistically need to budget for replastering. As soon as you take that paper off, a lot of the plaster is going to come with it. If it's a 1900s terrace house that still has the old form of plaster where it's horsehair and coal dust, that will all need to come off. It'll need reboarding and reskimming. Typically speaking, to replaster a room is around about £700 a room. If when you're inside and you've got the vendors or the estate agents showing around, and let's say it's summer, ask them to switch the central heating on. Obviously they're not going to have the heating on if it's warm, but it'd be really useful to see it firing up, then you know it's working, it's in good order. Obviously if it's in winter, more than likely the heating is going to be on. It's well worth asking when the heating system was fitted and if it's been regularly serviced. A regularly serviced boiler will last around about 15 years. Anything short than that, obviously you'll have to factor in that you might have to replace the heating system. Okay. The next thing you need to look for is the electrics. Okay, so you need to find where the fuse board is, and you're looking for a fuse board that has switches, not the little cartridges that you pull out that you replace a fuse wire with. And it's called a consumer unit. If that consumer unit has switches, it means it's been rewired relatively recently. It still might be over 20 years old though. So other signs to look out for are where the plug sockets are. Plug sockets should be, if it's been rewired within the last 10 years, around about a foot above the skirting board. If they're only 6 inches above the skirting board, those regulations predate the most recent regulations that we have now, and they'll be about 6 inches. And whilst they're likely to be safe, what you'll find is there'll be less plug sockets in the room, and in the world we live in today, we're more power hungry. So as you have to then plug extension cables in to meet the needs that we have, quite often you'll find you'll trip out the fuse board. So generally speaking, you would look to upgrade a house where there weren't enough sockets within the rooms, and that would require a full rewire. Again, on a terrace house, you're looking at around about £6,000. If the plug sockets are on the skirting boards, or you find you have old style light fittings, again, that's almost certainly a sign of a rewire. Other things to look out for is any springiness in the floors. If you feel that the floors are particularly bouncy, that could be an indication that the joist might need replacing. Excessive creaking when you walk across the floorboards might mean they're loose and just need screwing down, but likewise, if joists do need replacing, that can be costly. If you go into a house and you see a kitchen, you might not like the style of it, but if it's recently fitted, say within the last 5 years, a relatively cheap option is to replace the doors and the worktops. So again, there's no harm in asking when the kitchen was fitted and where they got it from, and what you might find then is you can get it the property more to your taste, and for a much cheaper cost. If there's a log burner, ensure that they have building regs for it, that it was fitted correctly. If you want a log burner in a property, you're generally looking at around about £3,000 to £4,000 to fit one. But if you have to add a flue, plaster around the hearth, expose the fireplace, then it can be quite costly. And obviously bathrooms. A new bathroom can cost in the region of anywhere between £3,000 up to £10,000, depending on what your tastes are and how handy you are. Your solicitor will confirm the likes of any building regs that are in place for any extension work that's been done, if any walls have been taken out. But just be certain to ask if you notice that it looks like any walls have been removed, when that was done, because that will help your solicitor in terms of determining when that work might have been carried out and what regulations it needed to adhere to at the time. On the whole, that's what you need to look out for. There's other things you can look for in terms of the gardens. Obviously, you might want to look out for Japanese knotweed if a garden is particularly overgrown. Don't forget to look in your neighbours' gardens if one of the neighbours' properties, the gardens there are overgrown. Any form of landscaping can be expensive. Landscaping can cost anywhere between £2,000 up to £20,000, again, depending on what taste you have. If you have to put some form of tiering into a garden, that can quite often be expensive. But Anything you're uncertain about, anything you want some advice if you're looking on a house, here at 3Sixty we're always happy to help. By all means, send us the right move or the Zoopla link through to us, and we'll talk through the photos with you and point out what elements you need to look out for and what things don't need to be a concern. It's not a survey. We will always recommend you get a survey, but as you're walking through a property and seeing it for the first time, it's really handy to look out for these things so you know if this is a property for you, or potentially it's a property which is going to be too much work that you don't want to take on. Hopefully you found this useful, and get in touch if you want any more information.